Hello, everybody. How's it going? Woo! So has everybody had a chance to play the free play arcade that's located out there? No? Well, you need to get on it.
I think you have 45 minutes off. You can go do that right now.
So has anybody wanted to have one of those games in your basement? I see a few nods, a few thumbs up. Nice.
Do some of you have those games already in your basement?
Woohoo!
Or upstairs, or downstairs, or bathroom, or garage, kitchen.
Garage, definitely.
Maybe you put it at your neighbor's house because you didn't have enough room in there. Yeah. So anyhow, we're here. We collect arcade games and have done so for a while, and we're going to talk about them and answer questions at the end if you have any. So yeah, and we are the panelists. Okay. So this is me. I'm Jordan. We started, Jeff Shanholz and I started Portland Arcade Collectors, which is a local collectors group. We copied a Seattle arcade collectors group. It's just a way to network with people in your own neighborhood as far as like trading parts and buying and selling games. Basically, I got into this because I was a kid and loved video games. I started playing them when I was about 6 years old. I wanted to play them as much as I could, and being 6 years old, I didn't have a lot of income, and I didn't get a lot of income for a long time, so I always wanted to play more games. Eventually I got old, and with that comes some other things, and I decided I could now buy some games. I didn't really know anything about it other than they were big boxes, and maybe you could buy them from other people, and hopefully they would work forever. And then I realized that, well, a lot of these, they don't even work right now. They've broken somewhere along the line. Nobody's cared about them for the last 20 years. And I've always been somewhat of a mechanical kind of fixing guy. So I had to look into how to repair these things. And that brought me to places where people were actively repairing these and restoring them, bringing them back to the way they were supposed to be. I usually have somewhere between 30 and 40 games that work. I'm into the classic era, mostly the 80 to 83 is kind of the golden era where arcade games were everywhere and where consoles were very not so good. And they were good to play, but they weren't like what you would put a quarter in. That was very exciting compared to like Asteroids, on a vector monitor was very different than Asteroids on a 2600. It just was not the same. So I'm into this, and I like to hoard parts for them to try to keep things going. And here's a couple funny pictures. So I'm standing next to my computer space there. That's the first arcade game. I'm trying to copy the ad if you've ever seen that before, but that's got an attractive lady. And then this is me dressed up as Paperboy for Halloween one day, or 1 year, not just one day. So, and
what year was Halloween more than one day?
Yeah. And this was, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And that lady next to me, she's not from a video game. She's from my life. I'm married to her, and still am, amazingly enough. So this is just a picture from my basement. I like to collect vector games, and these are some of my favorites, and they all have the same shape cab, so they make a nice, pretty picture. Okay. Anybody want to do Brandon's slide?
Brandon was supposed to be here, but he had an emergency delivery. He got taken away to have a baby, and as you see there, one of his claims to fame is that he likes to put dad on all high scoreboards. If he's at your house and he puts a high score up, he'll put dad on there. Because his first Asteroids Deluxe, the high score was dad, and it just drove him nuts until he could get that score off the board, and it took him a couple of months.
Yeah, months. And then as soon as he got the score off, I put another score up there with the initials dad.
So it became an ongoing joke that always put dad on the high scoreboard. But yeah, he started with a JAMA game and some 90s games. He quickly grew out of those and started discovering the classics after he started collecting. And he's kind of gone from there. And he likes to collect the rare games. Sorry,
he likes to tell you when your games are not rare.
Not rare.
He is an authority on rareness.
And he restored a Qbert, which I think we're going to see a little bit of here. So deconverting. So you can see the process of stripping it down, repainting, hit the next slide, adding new art, new control panel art on it, and next slide. And there you go. It's a brand new game, bringing it back to its glory.
This is me. I've been collecting for about 5 years. I am real close to around 50 machines at this point, and I'm way out of space. One of my space constraints means that what I started doing is collecting cabaret games. So everyone's familiar with the normal size upright cabinets and the cocktail sit-down cabinets, but there is an in-between size, which is still an upright, but it's a smaller footprint. And these were produced in much smaller numbers, so they're a little more collectible, a little harder to find, and that's the bulk of my collection. I have, 31 mini machines out of every game in my collection. So the first game I bought was Tempest. It was broken, figured out how to fix it. Bought more broken games, broken parts, I figured out how to fix most of them. I really like fixing stuff, and this hobby is way more affordable if you can buy stuff broken and fix it yourself instead of having to go out and have someone else do that. So this is my, this is maybe a third, not even that. This is one side of my game room. So this is my Atari row. The Dig Dug on the end there is actually straight out of the Atari engineering labs. It's never been put on location. It was taken home by an Atari engineer, and I'm the third owner of it, so that's probably the gem of my collection. And this is my workbench. This is where I do all of my repairs. A small selection of this is sitting in the pack booth if you want to come by and take a look, but that's the Atari PAT 9000. That's their official test station from the 80s, and it's completely awesome.
And this is me. So I grew up in 1980. I was 7 years old, and I was pretty much the target demographic for the video game industry at the time, and it kind of took over my life. I was, anybody remembers the show Silver Spoons, you know that Ricky Schroeder had a little arcade in his house. He had some arcade games in there, and that kind of blew my mind. I was like, there's no way you can have an arcade. You can have video games in your house. That's insane. So it wasn't until much later that I found the first game that I bought was a Joust, and it was more of an extension of collecting consoles. I like to collect consoles, and I was like, well, this is like the pinnacle of console collecting, is I'm going to have an arcade game, and it never crossed my mind that you could have more than one until I needed to fix that game. It would break down. I wouldn't know how to fix it, so I looked the Portland Arcade Collector group up, and I was like, well, I can hang out with these guys maybe and pick up some tips on how to fix the games. And that quickly, I went down to Jordan's basement, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many games in here, I can't believe it. So I was like, why do I not have more games? And so I immediately went to Craigslist and started searching games out, and it's only been a couple years, but I've got about 6 games that I keep in the house. I don't have much room. I don't have a basement or an extra room or anything like that for games, so I have a very limited space, and I've kind of tried to be judicious about my purchases on what I get and make sure the stuff that I get is really important to me, and not just going to Craigslist and saying, oh, this is $200, I can go grab that, and then just stick it in my garage, and it kind of gets pushed to the back. So everything I get is kind of very special to me, and is a game that I really like. So, and that's another fun thing about having a little arcade in your house, that you get to name it. So I named mine the Sputnik Arcade Station because I like space themed stuff. But that's all the games that I have in my house right there. So there's 6 games, and my wife is gracious enough to let me convert our dining room into a tiny arcade. So, game anatomy.
So we figured there might be people here interested in collecting their first game, so we were just going to kind of break it down. It's like you look at a game and you're like, well, what is that huge box? I mean, is that like filled to the brim with wires and electronics? I mean, what the heck is in there? And really, it's pretty simple. It's very similar to, I'd say, a game console, really. You've got your cabinet, it's made generally of wood. You've got glass maybe for the marquee, the part on the top with the name on it. You've got glass over the monitor. metal or wood control panel. You've got your art on the side of the game. You've got the coin mechanisms, that take the quarters. They're very simple, but if it's home use, who cares, They don't necessarily have to work. The marquee, we talked about that. It's the thing with the name on it on the top there. The bezel is the art that goes over the monitor, usually art around the perimeter there. And then you have your control panel and the controls, of course. So, this is pretty much like the holder of everything. What runs it, what makes it work, is a PCB. And I think we brought one here.
Yeah. So this right here is an Atari Centipede PCB. So this mostly works, but it doesn't entirely work. Haven't gotten around to fixing it yet. But if you ever worked on like IBM PC type hardware in the 80s, this should look real familiar to you. Very, very similar kind of layout. So you've got your CPU. This is a custom I/O chip for the sound and random number generator. Program ROMs, RAMs, dip switches for configuration, and an edge connector to connect up to the cabinet.
So you could, think of that as your cartridge. It's got the game code. It runs the game. Your screen is somewhat like a TV. It's a monitor. It's open in the back. It is probably the most common fault, maybe that, or power supply as far as broken games go. Relatively simple circuit compared to a game PCB. So a lot of times if you can figure out that a game has monitor problems versus the PCB game problems, that's a good thing. You might say, well, I have a working monitor at home. I'll get this game home broken, put my new monitor in it, and I'm good. So, it's just because one part doesn't work doesn't mean that the other part is broken. Many times you can find a game where you call it playing blind. You can hear the game play, it's responding the way you want it to. You just don't see anything. So that's usually a pretty clear indicator of a monitor problem.
Yeah, and I want to throw out here that, these games were designed for guerrillas to repair. You don't have to have a lot of tools to get in there and fix it. All you need is really basic diagnostic skills. You can say, this is a monitor problem, or this is a board problem, or this is a power supply problem, and then you can do what I like to call a gross repair, which is you replace the component containing the fault rather than repairing it. You can just replace it and have it up and running again. And don't be afraid of doing this. It's really very simple once you learn a couple things, just to say, has a board problem, has a monitor problem, and you can replace those very easily.
So, and then another big thing that fails a lot is a power supply. They don't always look like this. This is what we call a switching power supply. Generally, games after about the mid-'80s went to this. It's a very simple modular power supply with screw terminals on there that the wires hook up to. It gives you your 5 volts, your 12 volts, your ground, just the juice required to power the game board. Very similar to the power supply in a computer, like a PC thing. And then you have wires that put it all together. So this might be important if you find a game that's been converted to another game at some point. You might have a heck of a time unless you can find a harness to the game that you want to convert it back to. But I might be getting ahead of ourselves. We haven't talked about conversions. So anyhow, there's wires that connect it all.
Lots of wires.
Lots of wires. Okay. So where do you start if you want to collect games? What should you do?
So I think choosing a specific game to pursue is kind of a good idea. If you have a passion for a certain game, it's going to make it the hunt even more fun, and when you find it, it's going to be even a greater experience. So basically, I think if you hit the next slide, it's just looking on Craigslist, like continually looking on Craigslist for the games that you want, and also, if you find other people in your area to network with, it's a good idea to let them know what you're looking for. But yeah, Craigslist and even like this Popeye right here, $8.95. I mean, don't let that scare you, because either you can haggle with them or you just keep looking for one until one pops up in your price range. And yeah, it's a good place to start.
I'll say, this hobby has made me an incredible haggler. There's this book out there. It's called "You Can Negotiate Anything." I never read it, but I took the title to heart. So anytime you're out there, it's an asking price, and there's almost always some wiggle room in there. So, $8.95, I'd probably, well, I don't like that game, so I wouldn't offer shit.
I don't like Popeye either. Okay, so condition of a game is pretty important. We've got kind of a beat-looking game here. I don't know.
Used to be beat. Yeah, games like this, I mean, as you can see, there's like damage on the very bottom there from when people were playing, and they're probably kicking, they're kicking it with their feet and stuff, and there's some holes in the front from some arcades that put lock bars in front of the coin doors so people wouldn't try to break into them.
You can see the holes are covered up with some carriage bolts, so there's not just a hole in the wood, but the silver bolts on there are through where they drilled holes to put a lock bar over it to prevent people from breaking open the coin door and stealing all the money.
And so things like this aren't, I mean, they're definitely cosmetically unappealing, but as far as the game goes, as long as you don't see swelling in the wood, that indicates water damage. These are very, very fixable type cosmetic. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, these are fixable faults. I mean, you could
Fixable
play the
faults.
game as is. If you really want to do 100% restoration, that's all fixable as well. You can put wood dowels in those holes, seal it all up. This game looks like it probably has vinyl on the front, so
It does.
you would be revinyling the whole thing anyhow. So you just sand and smooth like body work on a car type of thing. You can use like filler, like Bondo filler on that choppy stuff on the bottom, sand that all smooth. You can have this game looking brand new again. There's no real problems here that are not fixable. I was just kidding about saying it was really beat. But yeah, water damage is the number one thing. A lot of these games were made of particle board. If they've sat in wet environments, they have sucked up that water and they've swollen and they basically turned into just like sawdust. And you will see that you don't want to mess with those.
Yeah, good tip for locating water damaged cabinets, because sometimes it can be kind of subtle, but usually along the front edge, the back edge, they have T-molding cut into a groove on the side panel. And if you look and you see the wood is wider than the T-molding, then that wood is swollen and needs to be replaced. It's all fixable. It's just, how much time and effort you want to put into it.
And here we are to the haggling again.
Making the deal.
Yeah.
Plenty of people out there on Craigslist that sell games. Some are just opportunistic. Some people just have this big lump that they want to get rid of. Some people are, think they have like something that's just like worth $1 bazillion. So it's just like any time you're dealing with people, it can be very interesting.
Yeah, we could talk about this for a long time, but just what I want to stress is to have some education when you go into a purchase, and have some idea what the machine is worth, and compare that to their asking price. And don't be afraid to walk away from the deal.
Right.
You don't. It sucks to overpay for something and then get it home and then feel all crappy about it because you're like, well, it's not in great condition, and there are these things I didn't notice, and it ended up costing too much money. Don't be afraid to just walk away. I've had some deals. I walked away, and 20 minutes later, the guy was on the phone. Well, okay, what about your lowball offer? I'll take that. So it's fine. You got to wait for the right machine.
Also, they're big, so you have to figure out how you're going to transport them.
We just put Jordan in the trunk.
So you generally want some kind of dolly, hand truck, whatever you want to call it, to move it around. Because they're heavy. They're, 300 pounds or something, and you can't just pick them up and put them wherever you want it. So, figure that out before you go to buy a game, because, there's nothing like haggling and talking someone down and then going, but
Can you hold it till next week?
But can you hold
Right.
this till next week?
Yeah, don't expect that they're gonna have someone there to help you move it or have something to move it with. I went into a deal like that and I forgot my dolly and I forgot to bring someone to help me move it, and luckily they had both there, so I was saved. So now you got a game. What are you gonna do with it?
Play it.
Play it.
So you get a game home, maybe you bought a project. A lot of times games that were one thing have been converted at some point to something else. And so maybe that was your plan, like say, hey, I really want a Robotron, but gosh, I can't find one. When I do find one, they're $1,500. I just can't pay that. but you find this WW Superstar for $100, and you're like, hey, I know what that is. That's a Robotron. I can take that game and I can put it back. So that's something, you know, that is very common in this hobby, anyhow. But maybe you just wanted to play that wrestling game. So maybe you bought it as a WWF Superstars, and you're just going to play the heck out of that. You're going to wrestle your friends and body slam them and have a great time. So, I mean, what's your plan? So if you do need to like restore or deconvert a game, you have to consider, like you're going to have to buy art for it. You're going to have to do some work. So this is a picture of that game. I did restore it back to a Robotron. Not the brightest picture, but there you go. You got a new bezel, new control panel, the right controls in it, a new marquee, new vinyl on the front, nice spiffy coin door, and everything's working. So.
And that's another one where if it's a game that you're really passionate about, it's going to motivate you to finish that project. I mean, if you get a game that you're not so passionate about and like halfway through you're just kind of like, oh, this is taking a really long time. I don't know if I want to keep going. But if it's something that you really want to play, like that Robotron, if you're like a diehard Robotron fan, you're like, I want to get through this project and I want to make it look nice, and that'll really push you through the finish line.
Yeah, I would say don't buy anything you don't like. Don't just buy games to fill up space, because your space will be filled up before you know it.
Yes.
I actually did make that mistake getting into the hobby, and I had games I had to sell because I realized I didn't like them, and I just bought them because I thought they were a good deal, or I just thought, I need to fill up all this space. This is great. I want to fill this with games, and the space will get filled up. And so I guess that leads us to repairs. You probably will encounter repairs, and some basic tools are very good to have. I mean, screwdrivers and things like that, evidently, for, opening up the games. Maybe a drill for drilling open the locks if it's all locked up and you can't get into it. Multimeter is pictured here, and this lets you do lots of diagnostics as far as if a game board is not working. Generally, you want to make sure it's getting power to it. So this allows you to check for voltage. Very easy. Someone could show you how to do it in like 10 seconds. What else? We've got parts. If you need parts, this was our friend Richard's house. He happened to get a mother load of parts, and this was his garage sale that he had. That's all like game PCBs all over the place. So it would be nice if every garage sale was full of arcade parts, but they generally aren't. So you might have to go on the internet and just find other people who have hoarded away parts. Things to help fix would be like your factory service manuals. If you can get a manual, or if you can download a manual, most of these are on the internet that you can download PDFs, and they are worded for the average person to diagnose a game. Really, I mean, it's not. You don't need a PhD in electronics to figure this stuff out.
I actually want to throw out here that this really should be. Before you go to pick up, you really should spend some time figuring out how the game plays and how it works. So if you're not familiar with the game, go grab the manual and go read through it and figure out, how do I put it in test mode? What does a test mode failure look like? Go watch some YouTube gameplay videos. How does it play? Is it missing any sounds? Do the graphics look right? Having this familiarity with how the game is supposed to work is going to really help you in the end, because if something is wrong with it before you go to pick it up, you're going to know right away that, I'm going to have to fix this, or, this is going to have to get repaired, or maybe it's got so many issues that I don't want it. There's a lot of stuff out there that's pretty beat and doesn't work right. So you got to know all that stuff up front.
And it's a good idea to not diagnose or try to fix the game on site when you're looking at it.
Bad form. Don't do it. Just, if you know what's wrong, keep your mouth shut. Get whatever price you can for it. Take it home. There is another collector who bought a game, and he got there and it wasn't working, and so they got negotiated a lower price, and then he goes and he pokes around with it. Oh, it fires right up. It's bad form. Don't do that. But you also. It could be a really simple thing. A lot of games have a single PCB that are designed to work in a cocktail machine or an upright machine. And if they're set to cocktail mode, the screen might look like it's upside down. So, you see that, and you're like, oh, this is a matter of going and changing a dip switch, and then it's going to work 100%. You got to know what you're in for, and a lot of this stuff looks really bad, but is a really simple fix. Also, if your monitor is scrambled, it can just be a sync issue. It's just as easy as a simple adjustment. So knowing this stuff up front is going to let you be able to grab those deals where there's a game that has a simple problem but isn't working right just there. But you can get it home and fix it in 5 minutes and have a good deal on a good game.
Yeah, these games were meant to be abused, basically, to just be, shoved somewhere and forgot about, turned on, and, I'll come back in a couple months and see if there's any money in it. I mean, they're pretty robust. But that being said, they are old and things fail over time.
And it depends on the game.
Yeah, and read up on your game. Some games are notoriously, they might have a problem where they have a battery on the board that leaks and corrodes away the board, and it's just like, if that battery's still there, it's probably going to be a really difficult and long repair unless you can find another PCB. But maybe everybody else has already found another PCB because their games had the same problem, and you just kind of got into something that's a little more difficult than the average game. But I guess we've got a game, and now we're wondering, well, okay, now I'm a little overwhelmed. I thought it was going to be an easy fix, and it's not, and I have this big hunk of wood, and, I can't, get to the cat food to feed my cat because this thing's in the way or something. But so there's various resources to find help and get your game working again. The internet, of course, we live in the internet age, so it's a really good way to meet people or not meet people. And I would say we always used to just call it KLOV. It's forums.arcademuseum.com. It is the website that has the most repair logs, where everybody's practically had every problem because it's just been around for a long time. And if you're good at searching, you can probably find somebody who's had your game and had that problem and hopefully came up with a way to fix it. If not, somebody who's probably selling the part that you need to fix it. So there's that.
And that's another good place if you're looking for idea of what things are going for price-wise, because there's a trading post on there. So they people sell games, trade games. People have games shipped across the country if they can't find a game. And if you just look on there for a few weeks or search back through the back catalog, you can kind of see, okay, this is what this game is going for. And as you're looking for your stuff on Craigslist, then you can say, okay, well, that's a pretty good deal. So that's another good resource for finding the basic price on the going rate on games.
Yeah, and speaking of price, do not use eBay as a price guide.
No.
Every eBay sale is, I would say most of them are way overinflated. Some of them are dirt cheap, but they're kind of all over the map. Most of the stuff, I think, goes for too much, and a lot of times, you'll go and someone will say, oh, well, this is going for such and such based on eBay, and that's an asking price on eBay, and it's been sitting there for 6 months and no one's bought it because the price is totally whack. So if you're gonna use that as a price guide, don't. But at least go and filter it on sold and see what the actual sale price was versus the ask price. But yeah, pretty much any eBay price is going to be way over what you're going to pay from another collector or from a forum like Clav.
I would say there's kind of just different variations of people selling games. There's kind of your collector-to-collector sales where the price isn't going to be the lowest, but it's going to be kind of what we consider the fair price usually. It's people who know or, kind of have this agreed-upon price, what games are worth. I don't know. We seem to like to obsess over this, and because we watch it rise and fall, I suppose. There's also like the Joe whoever who just wants to get this thing out of their house. They have a broken game. That's going to be usually your lowest price. I mean, I forever had like a rule where I wouldn't pay more than $100 for a broken game. And I got lots of great titles for $100 and fixed them. Now if you got competition in your area, maybe you'll have to pay more. And then you have your full bore retail price, like somebody who has a business. selling games, and they will just, they'll just wait. They have a storefront or an eBay store, and they will just, ask 3-4 times as much as what a collector would usually ask, and hopefully, someone comes along and gives them the price. Somebody who doesn't know what's going on. And I've repaired a game for somebody. It was a nice lady who she saw Miss Pac-Man on eBay, and it was like $2,500, and she thought, oh, that's great, yeah, excellent. And she bought it, and it didn't work when it got there. She paid to ship it across the country, and I was actually contacted by this operator who sold it to her, who has an eBay store, who sells games for really expensive. And because he has a lot of money, he offered me a lot of money to go fix it for him. And so I said, well, she's right down the street from me. Sure, I'll go take a look. And it was something very simple. It took me like 5 minutes. And but she didn't know what to do. She's not going to know what to do. So unless she came to this panel, and we just didn't have it back then. But.
And I forgot to impart the single most valuable piece of advice that I can give to anyone here. Do not buy a multicade. Just don't do it. Do not buy a multicade. These things are on Craigslist all the time with 60-in-1 boards. They suck. They're not a good experience. They don't play right. And any game that is being sold as a 60-in-1 is usually gutted by someone, and the parts thrown away or sold off. And it's ruining a game. They're not making any more of these. There's a limited supply, and rewarding the people who are destroying them is wrong. I don't want to do that. But just purely in value terms, it's not a good value. They're like $1,000, $1,200. It's way too much money for what you get. I don't know, something I think people find appealing about saying I can play more than one game in the same cabinet, which I understand, but it's just, they don't play right. It doesn't feel right. Don't buy them.
Yeah, generally the emulation's off, sounds are terrible, and it's like just some cheap bootleg PCB out of China that's like $50. So, I mean, if you think I can play 60 games for $500, it's not even.
Yeah, and they're usually.
You could build that yourself and put it in a cardboard box if you want, really.
Yeah. And these things are slapped together in an hour. It takes no effort to actually do this. It's just not worth it.
I think one of the things about this hobby is preserving these games and preserving the history of these games, because as Ian said, they're not making them anymore. There's a limited number of them in the world. I mean, there's some games where there's like a handful of that title, and so the more that you can take in and fix up, restore, not restore, just keep them running. I think it's an important thing for the generations of the future to see these games and to be able to play them, and to have like the free play arcade here, because all these games, a good handful of them are from Ground Control, but the rest of them are from local collectors. Like Ian has some games out there, and Jordan's Pong is out there, and so yeah, it's definitely important for the future generations and just to preserve the history of these games.
And the more you get into it, you'll notice that it's more than just a box. You see how the art is all different on all the different cabinets, and just the shapes of the cabinets, subtleties like that. It's the whole package, and it's not just a generic box with some electronics thrown into it. And if you have a project that you want to scratch build or whatever, you've got an idea for an awesome game, I mean, by all means, just build it from scratch. Or find something that's not, that really doesn't have an identity, kind of a generic cabinet that was designed to be generic, and go for it. But a lot of these, like he has a food fight, there's no other cabinet that has like that contour, that cutout, and that full side and front art. They're all slightly different, and that's what was cool, or one of the things that was cool about the games in the early 80s. They were all different. It wasn't standardized yet. Don't destroy those games.
Cool. So we have about 10 minutes left. I think having a Q&A is probably good. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
In terms of cost, which is better, buying the original or sourcing the parts and doing the build yourself?
Buying the original. If you can find a game that is complete and non-working, that's your best value, in my opinion. Everything is worth more money as parts. You can... Like I have a Tempest PCB, I fixed it. Those are selling for $250. You can find a complete broken Tempest for $500. Absolutely. If you can find a complete non-working game and fix it yourself, that's the best way to go.
And a lot of times, even spending more for a complete working game, you will probably be better off than doing a full restore from scratch. Art can cost a lot. Side art can be, $100. Control panel overlay, $50. Marquee, $50. Bezel, $100.
It adds up.
It adds up.
It's
pretty
a labor
quickly.
of love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes you just want a game that's perfect, and so you'll go out and you'll buy all that stuff because you want it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, do you have any advice for moving cabs up flights of stairs?
Don't.
Yeah, I killed myself trying to get a Street Fighter 2 up 4 flights of stairs. I think like 7 people.
Ooh,
Yeah.
7 people is too many. That's at that point you're just getting in each other's way. I used to live up a flight and a half of stairs, and I had 13 machines up there. Yeah, it sucks. What I did is I just had Brandon actually would help me move them up, but they were all the mini size, so it wasn't quite as bad. It still wasn't good, but it wasn't quite as bad. But yeah, I just found 2 people, one at either end, and take a break midway between your flight, and that was fine. But I didn't have any issues to deal with, like where the landing was overly small. There was plenty of room to actually turn it around once it was around the corner. But yeah, if you can avoid it, don't. Like my new place, one of the major features of it was everything's ground level, so I can get anything in there just by going over the front step.
I think there are some dollies that are kind of designed to go upstairs.
There are stair climbing
There's-
dollies, yes. They have
I-
like a car battery, and they have like this wheel on the back that flips over and lifts
Yeah.
the thing up
They-
onto the next stair. It does
I've looked
exist.
into these. They are prohibitively expensive, but maybe you can rent one. I think the cheapest I found at the time was $1,600, and I looked again recently. I forget why, but they were like $2 to $3 grand. It's a lot of money for something like that. It's probably cheaper to just move.
There are certain hand trucks or dollies that will have like a little track on the back, like a rubbery track,
Yeah.
and those help slide up the stair. Usually, you can only have one person on the top pulling up, maybe two guys on the bottom pushing, and just take it one stair at a time.
Yeah, and you got to be careful if you're pushing. You want to strap that game to the dolly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to push it right off.
Yeah, don't push it off the dolly. Down is a little bit easier.
Yeah, up front.
What kind of prep work do you do for the areas that you have? Like, Jordan, your basement is, being all over. You put a lot of electrical in there, break box.
I've found that kind of the sweet spot for a 20 amp service is maybe like 10 games. They probably take about 1.5 amps a piece, so that gives you a little headroom. So yeah, if you plan on having 30 games, you're probably going to want to make sure that area has at least 2 or 3 breakers serving it, or else you're going to have problems. You're not going to be able to turn them all on at once. And speaking of electricity, a lot of people will ask me, oh, your electricity bill must be so high. When they come down, they see all these games on, and they assume that I leave them on all the time, I guess.
Don't.
And you don't. You turn them on when you use them, and you turn them off when you're done. So, so your electricity bill won't be high. But yeah, make sure that you have enough power to power all your games. They're basically like a TV set. So if you have a room where you watch 30 TVs, you'll be just fine.
Yeah. The thing that's great about the arcade environment is, think of it like a strip club. You want nice dim lights, and you're not going to notice whatever's got wrong with your games, or that you've got bare, unpainted walls behind it. You're there for the games, and the focus is that you don't have to have everything built out super nice to have a nice looking game room.
Let the
So-
games provide the atmosphere.
Yeah, there was someone in back. Yep.
Yeah, where do you get your artwork from? Is it reproduced or is it left over from the 80s?
There are reproductions that are made. If you see one of the vendors out there, This Old Game, they reproduce a lot of artwork and bezels, control panel overlays. But you can also get new old stock art, which I think you got one for your Galaga
Yeah, I'm sorry, did you say artwork or hardware? Artwork, yeah.
artwork.
There's,
All the side art.
Hmm.
yeah, there are some modern reproductions If you are an Atari game collector, then you're in a lot of luck because a collector bought out containers full of documentation and artwork and all this stuff from Atari when they went bankrupt. So the original films used for making the screens to screen print the artwork are in their hands, and so there's excellent reproduction artwork, reprint actually, just because it's using the exact same films as the original was for many, many of the Atari games. For other stuff, you're into kind of a weird zone where you have to scan it and trace it and reproduce it, and it's a lot more work. But for any popular title, you're going to have no issue finding the art. You know, if you need Donkey Kong side art or whatever, there are a number of options for that, and you're not going to have any trouble. Once you get into rare games, then, you know, there's no market to sell reproduction art. So you either have to live with what you've got or go to it yourself. But yeah, as he was saying, This Old Game they have a booth here. They sell a lot of reproduction artwork. Phoenix Arcade also sells very high quality reproduction art. And Quarter Arcade, those three produce the bulk of stuff, and they all produce very high quality products. There are a lot of places out there that have lower quality art. Sometimes that's the only thing available, so just kind of know what you're looking for. Ideally, you want screened artwork, screen printed. For some cheaper places, they have solvent inkjet artwork, which can look okay, but it doesn't look quite as good. And some places just have really crappy, not solvent inkjet, and it'll, you know, look like crap. Even solvent inkjet, you have to have it laminated and UV protected, otherwise it'll start to fade and get really grubby. So you just gotta, you know, again, education is key.
Yeah, if you see something on eBay that's like, you know, quarter of the cost of everything else, probably, yeah, you'll get what you pay for.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they might even bother to like make it the right size or anything. It's just kind of, well, it's the game, but yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, there's definitely new old stock artwork left over from the 80s, but, you know, there's not much of it, and you pay a premium. So I do have a few new old stock pieces for some games that I'm either restoring or planning to restore. But yeah, it's pretty significant money, and, you know, it's 30-year-old glue, so you never really know what's going to happen. Is it going to stick? So it's a crapshoot, and you know, I've seen a lot of folks with new old stock artwork, and, you know, they just peel the backing off and it delaminates and it's garbage. So it really is a crapshoot. It's terrible to see.
Yeah, sometimes the NOS stuff, the best thing to do with it is just scan it, and so it can be reproduced. Yeah.
We have 1 minute.
1 minute remaining.
Any other questions?
We do have.
Yeah.
I heard that working on monitors, you know, can be pretty tricky or potentially dangerous. So I was wondering, like, what's the deal with that? Like, what's the best way to approach that in a safe way?
Yeah,
question.
the first time I don't know, a few times you work on a monitor, you're going to be quaking. It's definitely, there is a risk there, but, you know, I think it's overblown. The most important thing to do is to discharge it. So there's, and, you know where the dangerous parts are, and don't mess with it when it's powered up unless you're fairly confident. You know, the suction cup on the tube, that's the anode wire, that has anywhere from 12 to 20,000 volts on it. So you don't want to lick that. And when you turn it off, depending on the monitor, if it's a later style monitor and if it's working correctly, that will be bled off in a few minutes. But if it's not working right, which if you're working on a monitor you can't trust, you know, it's kind of a crapshoot. And all you need is a wire with some alligator clips and a screwdriver with an insulated handle. And you clip one end onto the screwdriver, one end onto the metal frame, and slide it under the suction cup. It'll go pop, and you're fine. Then you can just pull it right off. Monitors are pretty easy to work on once you just get over kind of the fear that was drilled into you that they will kill you. You know, working on a PCB like this is actually a lot harder just because the traces are smaller, the pads are smaller. It's a lot more delicate work. Monitors and power supplies all have big fat traces, and they're much, much easier to work through than a game board. So, you know, don't fear it.
And you can look it up. It's called discharging a monitor. There are people doing it with videos, on YouTube. Anybody who sells monitor parts probably have some mention about it because they don't want to hear that their customers are dying because they won't get any more money from them, I suppose. But you know the dangerous bits, and usually you're working on getting the little PCB part out of the monitor and working on that. And so once it's discharged, it's all safe. You can touch whatever you want. The tube, you don't do much with that unless it's adjustments and convergence and stuff, which is another topic, I suppose. So I guess at this point, we're going to plug our podcast. So I know we're very thrilling to listen to. I'm sure you guys just can't wait to hear more of us. So if you do, check out our podcast.
Yeah, the podcast is way better because we drink.
Yeah, there we're drunk, here we're sober. So I apologize for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.